So it's clear that religion is one of the places that women get their comfort, if you like. What about inside the marriage? Are marriages thought of as, by those who were in them, as areas of intimacy? Were they thought of as arenas of conflict, of economic support? How would a woman who'd been married for 5 or more years think about her marital situation?
Well, I have found many letters that women have written which, well, obviously, marriage is a financial necessity for most middle-class women who wish to maintain their class status. And, I mean, one need only to read Jane Austen to know the importance of marriage. And this was true in the United States as well as in England. The whole structure of women's society moved women along to the point of marriage. So it was the unusual young woman who did not wish to get married. On the other hand, I've read many, many letters that women wrote during this period, basically from the 1760s into the 1880s. And I have found that it was very frequent that women simultaneously feared marriage. That they would, in the months preceding a marriage, they would spend their time visiting cousins, aunts, sisters, etc., a wide network of their female friends and kin, ostensibly to learn the craft of marriage, of housekeeping, of child rearing, etc., but also indicating great fear about this. Or I have one letter that a woman wrote to another woman where she said, "I am so nervous." The woman who wrote the letter was in London. Her friend was getting married in New York, I believe. And she's writing letters saying, "I'm so worried about you. Are you all right? What is happening to you?" They don't exactly say what they're afraid of, specifically. But reading their letters and reading between the lines in their letters, I would say one obviously would be they're afraid of the wedding night. They're afraid of sexual intercourse because they've been, very protected as middle-class women. I think they're afraid of the separation from their families and their kin systems, which were very, very strong and a central part of their lives in the city as well as in the country. One woman writes that she is devastated at the thought of being separated from her grandmother. Women frequently will accompany one another on honeymoons. Male friends accompany the groom on honeymoons also. This is sort of a social event. The sisters, cousins will move in with the couple, especially in the early months or years of the marriage, to be there to support we're not talking about the isolated 20th century family here at all. This is very much a couple embedded in very deep, dense networks of family and friends. I think also you have to realize that this has been true from childhood on. Boys and girls are growing up very much embedded in these networks of friends they make in boarding school or in school, and of their family and extended family of cousins and aunts and uncles and great aunts and uncles and so forth. Each is very much gender specific. So girls are growing up in a female kinship network, boys in a male kinship network, so that they're not interacting that much. Sort of Laurie and Little Women is an exception, I would say, in this period. They grow up quite separate. They have separate traditions. They've learned separate ways of behaving, jokes, friends, and then these people who have had a fairly restrained courtship period then come together.
And so marriage actually disrupts what
marriage
is
feared for disrupting women fear that their marriages will disrupt this. And so their letters are constantly saying, no matter what happens, we will still always love one another. There's one wonderful letter that I have, I could try to find it, but in which a woman says, I can't wait for your husband to leave. I want to kick him out of bed, jump into bed with you, and curl up against you and talk as we have always talked. And they did this, more for rural families than for urban families, but these visits from friends or kin would be prolonged for several months. And often the husband would leave the marital chamber and the friend would move in, and displacing the husband for weeks or months. This was not unusual. This was not considered strange in any way. This was considered just an example of women's heightened sentimentality, the depth of their love, and it was seen as a virtuous thing.
So men continued to live in their own social groups,
especially
just
as work
women.
leaves the home and it goes into places where respectable women are not to go. Then men have this world, and they have their chums there, and their rituals, and their drinking evenings, and they belong to clubs, all sorts of things like this. And the women have comparable associations. So it is, in many ways, I mean, there's an interesting sort of parallel tracks that women are experiencing. They're experiencing this really traditional world that goes back to the 18th century, perhaps even to the 17th century, of these domestic circles, of women embedded in a female family. Because remember, sex and physiology are very important here. Pregnancies are frequent and ongoing throughout a woman's life, so it is not unusual for a woman to have, in her 20s, to have a daughter, and then as that daughter marries and becomes pregnant, the woman is still going to have children, but still may be pregnant at the same time as her daughter is. They may give birth very close to one another. So there's this extended family. The daughter may be helping to raise her younger siblings. There's a fusion of the role of mother and daughter, which lies at the heart of this female network of kin and friends. This is this world. So they know a lot about pregnancy, nursing, miscarriages, menopause, because they see their mothers going through this, or their older sisters going through this, or their aunts. Generational boundaries are not distinct in this period, so that if you have a family births going over a 20 or 25 year period, which was not unusual, you're going to have aunts that are almost the same age as older daughters. As I said, mothers and daughters pregnant at the same time. This is this world. There is essentially, through the first half of the 19th century, not much option for change. Women's higher education doesn't develop until the 1870s and the 1880s. There's no rupture. There's no perceived end of this until you get to the post-Civil War period.